You see a coworker's new car in the parking lot, and something tightens in your chest. You didn't ask to feel it, you just do. For a second, you're not thinking about your own life at all. You're thinking about theirs. That flicker is old. Older than cars, older than money, older than agriculture itself. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent years studying small-scale hunter-gatherer societies, and he found something that seems to contradict the image most people have of prehistoric life. You probably picture bands of early humans as naturally equal, naturally generous, free of the status games playing out today. But Boehm's research told a different story. Jealousy wasn't absent. It was managed, constantly, deliberately, and with real social force. Here's the scene. A hunter walks back into camp carrying a spear that flies straighter than anyone else's. Lighter shaft, sharper point. Maybe he shaped it himself, maybe he traded for it. Doesn't matter. What matters is what happens next in the eyes of everyone watching him walk in. You'd expect admiration, and there was some. But researchers studying groups like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Juhwansi of the Kalahari documented something else running underneath it. A kind of watchfulness, attention. The other hunters clock the spear. They clock how he holds himself while carrying it. Does he mention it too much? Does he offer it around, or does he keep it close? That tension had a name long before anyone wrote it down. Anthropologists call it leveling behavior, and it wasn't gentle. If a hunter got too proud of his tools or bragged about a kill, the group had ways of cutting him down. Mockery was common. So was ridicule aimed directly at the achievement itself. Anthropologist Richard Lee, working with the Juhwansi, recorded a practice that sounds almost cruel at first. When a hunter brought back a large kill, instead of praise, he'd often be insulted, called lazy, told the meat was thin, the animal small, the effort barely worth mentioning. The hunters themselves called this insulting the meat. Why humiliate someone for succeeding? Because success, left unchecked, breeds something dangerous in a small group. Not admiration, hierarchy. And hierarchy, in a band of 30 or 40 people who all depend on each other to survive, is a threat to everyone's chances of eating next week.
Think about what a spear actually was. Not a possession the way you'd think of possessions now. A spear was survival, status, and identity fused into one object you could carry in your hand. If one man's spear made him visibly better, faster, more successful than everyone else, and nobody checked that gap, it could calcify. Today, he shares more meat because he catches more. Tomorrow, people start listening to him first, deferring to him. Within a generation, you don't have a band of equals anymore. You have a chief and everyone else. Early humans, it turns out, built entire social systems specifically to prevent that outcome. Boehm called this a reverse dominance hierarchy. Instead of the strongest person dominating the group dominates anyone who tries to rise too far above it.
And the mechanisms went beyond insults. Boehm documented a whole toolkit small-scale societies used against anyone drifting toward dominance. Gossip first, quiet and constant, tracking who was getting too big for the group. Then open ridicule, aimed at the achievement itself rather than the person, so the point landed without starting a war. If that failed, disobedience. The group would simply stop listening to the person's suggestions, stop following his lead on a hunt. And in the most extreme, rarest cases, ostracism. Push someone far enough outside the group's tolerance, and the band would simply stop including him at all, which in a hunter-gatherer world was close to a death sentence. Nobody survives long alone.
What's striking is how early this shows up, and how little teaching it seems to require. So jealousy wasn't just a private, uncomfortable feeling people quietly endured. It was a signal, a warning light. And the group had learned, over tens of thousands of years, to read that signal and act on it before it turned into resentment, before resentment turned into conflict, before conflict turned into a fractured camp that couldn't hunt together anymore. Some researchers have found that this leveling instinct shows up even in early childhood, before kids have been taught any explicit rules about fairness, suggesting the wiring for it runs deep rather than being purely cultural. But here's where it gets more interesting than simple suppression. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied a practice among the Zhuhonsi called zhraro, a gift exchange network where people gave away tools, beads, and resources to distant partners, not for equal trade in the moment, but to build long-term social insurance. Give freely now, and when your hunting luck runs dry, someone else's spear feeds your family instead. That reframes the entire feeling. The best hunter's spear wasn't a threat to be neutralized out of spite. It was a resource the whole group had a stake in, which is exactly why the group cared so much about how it was carried, how it was talked about, whether it was shared. Jealousy, in this light, wasn't the opposite of cooperation. It was one of the tools that enforced cooperation. There's a reason this feeling refuses to stay quiet, even when you know better. Psychologist Leon Festinger proposed something in the 1950s called social comparison theory. The idea that humans don't judge their own worth in a vacuum. You judge it against the people closest to you, not against some abstract standard of a good life, but against the specific person standing 3 feet away with a better spear.
That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Studies on envy consistently find that people don't compare themselves much to strangers on the other side of the world or to people wildly outside their circle. A farmer doesn't lie awake resenting a king he's never met. He lies awake thinking about the neighbor with the better harvest. Proximity is what lights the fuse, which makes sense if the whole system evolved inside small bands where everyone really was 3 feet away, all day, every day, for your entire life. Neuroscience has since given this old feeling a physical address in the brain. In a study using brain imaging, researcher Hidehiko Takahashi and colleagues found that envy activates regions overlapping with the brain's physical pain network, the same circuitry that lights up when you stub your toe or nurse a wound. Watching someone else succeed, in other words, can register in the brain almost like an injury. The same research also suggested that watching an envied person fail activates reward circuitry usually tied to pleasure, a reaction with an unflattering name, Schadenfreude, that may be the flip side of the exact same ancient alarm.
That single fact reframes the whole spear story. It wasn't dramatic exaggeration for a hunter to feel genuinely wounded watching someone else walk into camp with the better tool. His brain may have processed it in some small way as an actual injury to his standing, and a wounded animal in a small band doesn't quietly nurse the wound. It acts. It gossips. It undermines. It recruits allies against the person who caused the pain, which is precisely why the group had to step in first before that private ache turned into a public fracture. Insulting the meat wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was preventative medicine for the whole camp's social wound. Now, bring that back to the parking lot. Your coworker's car, your friend's promotion, the stranger's home you saw online at 1 a.m. None of that resentment is really about the object. It never was. It's an ancient alarm system built for bands of 30 people who all needed each other to eat, going off in a world of billions of strangers it was never designed to track.
You don't live in a camp of 40 anymore. You live surrounded by more comparisons than any human brain evolved to process. A feed, a platform, a highlight reel from someone you'll never even hunt beside. Festinger's proximity rule still applies. It's just been broken by technology. Your brain treats a stranger's vacation photos the way it once treated the hunter 3 feet away. Because as far as your ancient wiring is concerned, anyone visible enough often enough counts as close. The alarm still fires the exact same way it did around a fire 40,000 years ago. It just has nowhere useful to send the signal anymore. No shared meat. No Hoxero network waiting on the other end. No group ready to step in and insult the meat before resentment festers into something worse. Just a notification, a small physical ache somewhere behind your ribs, and a feeling with nowhere to go, and no elder aunt to talk you down from it.
Maybe that's why it sits so heavy.
Not because something is wrong with you for feeling it, because the wiring is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's just firing into a world that stopped listening back. 40,000 years of social correction, and all of it evolved for a world where the person with the better spear was somebody you'd see again tomorrow. Somebody whose success or failure actually touched your own dinner. Now the person with the better spear is a stranger you'll never meet, and the ache still shows up anyway. Uninvited, unnecessary, and completely, predictably human. So the next time you feel that tightness watching someone else's success, you might notice it's not really envy of the object at all. It's the oldest alarm you own, going off in a world that finally has too much to compare.